Getting to the heart of the matter. Back to Guy, Ben, and Frank with more Inside the News.
Well, welcome back to Inside the News. This is our election trail segment, and you are listening to us on affiliates all across the country. This is our affiliate shout out. You can also hear us on SoundCloud, WBV Inside the News, YouTube, and AUN TV. You can find them at AUN-TV.com. Good people over there. We want to thank them for carrying the program. All right, for our election trail segment here, Frank, there's a lot going on. And Karen Bass, that came up, and now Susan Rice, that's come up. And Biden has put himself in a box, because this box is, I'm going to pick a female as my running mate for vice president. And, it could have been Cuomo, could have been anybody else. He could have actually gone with a man, but he put himself in this box to try and win votes at the time and popularity. And it could come back to bite him right now. What do you think about that, Frank?
Well, it certainly could have. One of the things you do in whatever profession you're in is you never box yourself in advance. And the Biden campaign certainly erred substantially in doing just that. He has now limited himself to a collection of possibles that really don't seem to excite the public for very good reasons. Kamala Harris's presidential campaign did not work well. She didn't do great in the debates. She was not particularly popular throughout the country within the Democratic Party. I have a feeling she will have a real problem with the hard left of the Democrat Party if she did become the vice presidential candidate. She's not particularly great on her feet. She's not erudite. Let's go to another choice, Karen Bass. You almost have to laugh at how bad that turned out to be. Karen Bass, who was a real rooter for Fidel Castro, just at the time the Democratic Party is desperately trying to say that they are not a party of the extreme hard left, they're not communist sympathizers. Who do they start thinking seriously about as a vice presidential candidate but a good pal of Fidel Castro and the communist regime in Cuba? What a disaster for them. You go further down the list. You have Stacey Abrams from Georgia, who was on the list at one point, probably still is to some extent, made an absolute fool of herself when she refused to accept the election results that were pretty clear in her state. And you go on and on and on. Susan Rice, who is a perennial liar. Susan Rice comes across almost as a character out of Saturday Night Live. She has made such an image of herself. There used to be, during the Desert Storm War, a fellow named Baghdad Bob, who was a spokesman for the government, the Iraqi government. And he would lie. You would hear, well, there's no attack on Baghdad, and you would hear the bombs falling in the background. That essentially is Susan Rice. So at this point, I don't think Joe Biden really has a number of viable choices, and it's his own fault because of the corner that he's painted himself into.
Boy, oh boy. Yeah, you got there with Baghdad Bob, and who knows what's going to happen here. Ben, it is interesting to watch this whole thing play out. And I'm just going to throw out a wild card here. What if he picks Bernie Sanders? Bernie Sanders, he would then it's not going to be a female, but I'm going to pick Bernie Sanders as my running mate. He now wins back that side of the votes, but he's going to end up alienating. Either way, he's going to lose, isn't he?
Well, he's painted himself, as we said, into a pretty tough dilemma. He does not have great choices. Kamala Harris, as Frank said, is a terrible campaigner. She was very bad on the stump, and she did not seem to excite many voters, including black voters, during her brief run for the presidency. And Susan Rice is just, she's just a terrible human being.
She'd be liar in chief.
A complete habitual liar, caught in so many lies, it's really amazing. And Karen Bass, of course, is a committed Marxist, so that's probably not a great choice. So I don't know where he's going to go. Bernie Sanders could be interesting. It would be the greatest geriatric ticket in the history of presidential elections, combined age of closing in on 200. So but it would excite a lot of the younger people in the Democratic Party who are not at all excited by Joe Biden. And in fact, that's one of his problems. He does not excite anybody at all in the party other than the excitement of getting Trump out of office. So he has a lot of problems, a lot of issues. He really has a tough choice.
Yeah.
If he does not go with a woman, and in particular a woman of color at this point, he will face a big backlash within the party just by virtue of that. Bernie Sanders might be the only way he could go that would be a white male that would avoid at least such a backlash as to really damage his chances.
All right. The idea, and we floated this out last week in our program about the no debate issue, and is Biden going to be able to do it? Joe Biden was actually interviewed by a national, one of these networks, and the question was posed to him, give us a reason why people should vote for you. In other words, okay, here, tout your stuff, give us your commercial. He had none. He says, well, the people will choose. And he couldn't come up with, and it's like, you got to be able to sell yourself if you're in politics. He's been doing it ever since Noah had the boat here, Frank. But the New York Times, and I think we talked about this, they're actually floating the idea of no debates.
Well, any possibility that the New York Times had of projecting itself as an objective source of news flew out the window when the New York Times came out with the idea of no debate. Look, from the Biden campaign standpoint, not debating is a great idea for them, because Biden obviously will not be able to stand not just up to the rigors of a discussion on the major issues, but I don't think he can stand up to the rigors of being in front of a camera for 90 minutes or so. His infirmity will become more and more apparent. I think that's going to be a disaster for the Biden campaign. But if you go to the concept of how this is slowly working its way into the public consciousness, we discussed, I think on a couple of shows ago, that the Democrats were saying, well, Trump is not a legitimate president. He doesn't deserve to be given the stage to advance his terrible ideas in front of the American people. That was slowly inculcating itself into the news feed. And I think that is going to continue to build, because if indeed Biden does become the candidate of the Democratic Party, not necessarily assured, by the way, despite the fact that he has the votes, he can't stand up to the rigors of a debate. Something is going to have to happen to intervene. Once he debates Trump, the campaign is essentially over. Going back to something that Ben had said that makes a lot of sense. If in fact you do substitute a non-black candidate, the very tenuous hold that the Democrats have on their supermajority of black votes flies out the window. Just about a 5 or 6% difference in the amount of black votes that the Democratic Party gets could be the death knell for them. So they are pretty much locked in to having a black candidate. The other strength that they have, we've been told so far, is white suburban housewives. So if you take a female off the ticket, then perhaps that significant impact on the Democrat vote goes out the window as well. They painted themselves into a pretty bad corner.
All right. Well, on that note, we're going to end this segment. We're going to come back with the Picking Up the Pieces segment. And one piece that we did not talk about is the virus. Yes, it's the virus. People talk about the virus. Well, guess what? Is it coming back? Dr. Burke says it is. Fauci says, let's go back to school. And Donald Trump, President Trump, is saying we've got to move forward. Ben's going to talk about that when we get back. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News.